The next thing we're going to go over is something that I think a lot of people have a little trouble with. How many of you guys have trouble with planes of motion? Just a little bit. A little confusing. Probably because somebody pointed to that picture in a book and told you learn them, which is not okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down planes of motion one plane at a time. First, we're going to define, and then we're going to demonstrate, and then we're going to do an activity. So, let's start with the sagittal plane. Let's start with this plane right here. Sagittal plane refers... Oh, let me back up a step. Does everybody know what a plane is? Right, a plane is just like two-dimensional surface going on forever, right? We could say that this is a plane. So does anybody know why we have planes of motion? Why are planes of motion important? To assess movement. We need to be able to categorize and analyze movement in the human body, right? So all we've done is we've stolen these from math. We didn't come up with the cardinal planes. True. All right, we've stolen these so that we have a way of analyzing what we're seeing, which is going to be important as we go through the day. Now, coming back, there's only 3 planes. I want you guys to remember that. Only 3 planes. How many of you guys have taken multiple choice tests? All right. Your choices as we go through the next 15 minutes are A, sagittal, B, frontal, C, transverse, D. There is no D. Everybody cool with that? So no matter how confused anything gets in the next 15 minutes, remember there's only 3 choices. You have a 33% success rate right off the bat. Everybody's cool with that? All right, so let's get back to this sagittal plane. You guys understand what a plane is? The sagittal plane is the plane that goes this way. So it cuts the body into right and left halves. It refers, when we refer to it with motion, generally we're talking about motion that is forward and back and up and down. Everybody's cool with that. Now, who wants to be my sagittal plane model? Come on up, sir. Now, to make this easier for you guys for a visualization, I want you to pretend... What was your name?
Lamar.
Lamar. Big round of applause for Lamar. Coming up here and being the sagittal plane model. We're going to pretend like Lamar is stuck in a narrow sagittal hallway. Everybody cool with this? We're going to see what motions could he possibly do if he was stuck in this narrow sagittal hallway and the walls were made of glass that we don't want him to break. Everybody's cool with that? All right, so Lamar, let's go ahead and have you face the room. All right, you can stay right there. You ready for this? All right. So, if I put his head in the narrow sagittal hallway, what can we do with his head? Yeah, all he can do is say, yes, right? He can nod his head, yes. Yes, this is a very weird demonstration. All right. You guys got that? What about if I put his arms in the narrow sagittal hallway? Up and down. So can you act out, Lamar, what they're talking about? Bicep curls, they said. Bicep curls, what else could he do? What about his shoulders? Front raise, demonstrate, guys, demonstrate. Good, good. What about, let me get under your arms. What about his trunk being stuck in the narrow sagittal hallway? He can do, give me an exercise, something. He can bend forward, right? You could take a bow. You could take a bow. Take a bow, Lamar. You're doing fantastic. All right. What about his legs? What can he do with his legs? He could do some high knees. Let's see some high knees. All right. All right. What else could he do? Squat. He might be able to squat. Sure. Can you squat? Cool. He just made it. All right. So here's what I'm going to have you guys do. Lamar, you can sit down. Once again, big round of applause for Lamar. Here's what I'm going to have you guys do. You are going to write down, you guys see on page, what is this? Page 3 of your workbooks, you guys have these boxes. Now you guys can work in little groups if you want. I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to try to come up with as many exercises as you can possibly think of in the sagittal plane. You guys ready? Go. How you guys doing? You almost got all your exercises? All right. Now we're going to bring them up here. So, just so we don't have absolute exercise chaos, let's divide these up into big sections. So let's start with upper body. What do you guys got for upper body in the sagittal plane? Push-up? Could I do push-ups within my narrow sagittal hallway? Right? So if this is my hallway, imagine this extending all the way up, right? I'd be trapped like this. Can I get my arms here? No, right? Does that mean I can't do a push-up? Not necessarily, but I got to modify it. You got it. You got it. So what are we going to call that? Can you stand up and show me? You go from here and then go which way? So you can go this way, right? Would this be in the sagittal plane? Sure. So we'll go. You guys want to call that a close grip push-up? Can we do that? That's cool. Close grip push-up. What else can we do? Shrugs. That's a good one. I want you to save that one because the answer is no. But if I try to put in my hallway, it looks like a yes. So you got to save that till we get to a couple planes and then ask me that again. I'll explain that one. Tricep extensions. Can we do tricep extensions in my narrow sagittal hallway? Yeah, right? And of course, if I can do tricep extensions, what else could I do? Bicep curls. All right, so I could do this. I could do this. I can do this. What else? Front raises. What else? You've had your hand up. Who wants to come up with a name for this exercise? Overhead tricep extensions? Yeah, what it really comes down to is, like if you look at your elbow, right? How many planes does your elbow move in? Basically one, right? Your elbow moves in one. This isn't really your elbow. It's a different joint. But if we think about it, it only moves in one plane. If you guys picked something other than the sagittal plane for your elbow to do, I'd be worried about you. I would, right? Like if it moves in a different plane, it's probably going to only do that once, and it's going to hurt a lot. All right, so we got anything we can do with the elbow is going to probably happen in the sagittal plane. What other exercise? Anybody got anything else? A close grip seated row. Way to steal the one from the board. One of my favorite exercises. All right, let's move on to the lower. What do you got for the lower body? Lunge. Squat, I heard. You guys can blurt it out. You don't have to raise your hands. What else? Hamstring curls? Sure. Hamstring curls. Calf raise? Sure. Leg press. What was that? Deadlifts. Sure, I can do that in my narrow sagittal hallway. Anybody got any trunk stuff? Some core stuff? Crunches. Yeah, crunches we could do, right? What the? Yeah, so this would happen in my narrow sagittal hallway. What else? Hip extensions. Like this?
Yeah, I was
Or like
on the Rowan chair.
on the Roman chair, okay. Okay, so this exercise?
Yeah.
Okay, well, leg raises, we'll call them. Not my favorite exercise. We'll find out why later. What else? Back extensions. And that's a pretty good list. It's a really, really good list. Should we move on to the next plane? So we got A sagittal down. Let's go for B, frontal, right? So our frontal plane goes this way. Right? Sometimes it's called the coronal plane, right? Like a crown. So it goes this way, cuts our body into front and back halves, generally refers to motion that is side to side and up and down. So who wants to be my frontal plane model? This one's actually really easy. Let me give you a story on how I used to teach this. This is going back many, many years. I used to teach at New York Sports Club. You guys know New York Sports Clubs? Boston Sports Clubs, Philadelphia Sports Clubs, right? So I used to teach there, teach all their trainers. And when we got to planes of motions, I used to teach in this big group exercise studio with glass enclosure. And I used to come up and just step outside the room and go, here's what you think of when you think frontal plane. I want you to think of what movement you could do if you had a plane of glass in front of you. Right? So if I have a frontal plane in front of me, what can I do without breaking through that glass? Now who wants to be my frontal plane model? Come on up. What was your name again? Marla. Everybody, big round of applause for Marla. This one, you picked the plane to be the model for. Because here's what we got to do to poor Marla. Right, this is the frontal plane. So I'm going to drop it down just a little bit, but what could she do with her head? She could do this kind of thing, right? Kind of side to side. What could she do with her shoulders? And I'm going to drop just a little bit below. Yeah, maybe side raises. You won't hit me, I got a longer reach. All right, what could she do with her trunk? Yeah, some of this stuff. What about her hip? Yeah, so she could do, what is that? Yeah, she could do that sort of thing, right? You guys ready? You guys can call exercise whatever you want. As long as you know what it means, you can call it whatever you want. Big round of applause for Marla. Now what I want you guys to do is the same thing. You now have a box for frontal plane. I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes on this one to come up with as many exercises as you can. How many of you guys are stuck? A few people? Okay. I don't want us to go too outside the box. So let's go ahead and do the same thing now. Just for the sake of organization, we'll start with upper body exercises. What do you guys got for upper body? Lateral raises? So lateral raises. You guys got a couple more in you. Come on. Shoulder press how? Show me. Yeah. So if I had a plane of glass in front of me, could I still do this? Sure. Sure, we'll call that military press. Wide grip shoulder press. What else could I do? Pull-ups. Well, maybe you can do pull-ups. Me, not so much. Anybody else have a hard time with pull-ups? They're hard. A lat pull-down, sure, sure. All right, so we got lat pull-down. What about lower body? A side lunge. So you can do a lunge to the side. It's called a lateral lunge, frontal plane lunge, side lunge. So as long as we're upright, right? As long as we're here. If I were to do the seated ab and adduction, and I had a plane of glass in front of me, right? Could I get there? No, right? But as long as it's this way, we're good. Like the multi-hip machine. Have you guys ever seen the multi-hip machine? Right? And you do one of these things, or you can come in with it. All right, so that's ab and adduction. Beginning to think this marker sucks. Anybody got anything else? What about side shuffles? Side shuffles work? Anybody do lateral drills? Nothing? Nobody? Yeah. What about trunk? What can you do with your trunk? Core. This thing? The Weeble Wobble exercise, right? Side bends. We will have fun with this exercise later. When we get into anatomy and we find out what's actually working in that exercise, not what people usually think it is. All right, so we got one more plane. And this one's kind of the toughie as far as conceptualizing and understanding which exercises fall into this plane. So that's the transverse plane. Also known, let me give you guys a little help. It's also known as the horizontal plane. Has anybody heard that? I'm going to go artistic on you guys here for a second. You guys ready for all this? All right, why is it called the horizontal plane? Which way does the horizon go? Can you guys tell my mother was a professional artist? Can you guys tell? Isn't that amazing? This is the horizon, right? So the transverse plane is the plane of the horizon. Now, generally speaking, when we talk about exercise, we're referring to rotational movements, our transverse plane, that's parallel to the transverse plane, or limb movements parallel to the horizon. What else do you have that is parallel to the horizon right in front of you that could help you visualize limb movement in the transverse plane? Your desk, right? So we're talking rotational movements or limb movements that are parallel to your desk. You guys got this? All right, 3 minutes, all the exercises you got. You guys get kind of stuck on this one pretty quick, right? You start going through it and you're like, wait a second. There's not that many exercises for this plane. All right, so upper. What do you guys got for upper? Chest fly. I like it. What else? Arm circles. Oh, that's an interesting one. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that actually happens in a couple of different planes. You're on the right track. This is kind of a weird, like, cross crossing planes motion. What other exercise? Oh, come on. Seriously? All you guys do is chest flies? A bench press. And if a chest fly and a bench press fit here, what else probably fits here? You said it earlier. Push-ups, right? If you think of like a traditional push-up here, everybody go through this motion. Are you moving parallel to your desk? Yeah, this was sagittal, but this is transverse. And evidently you guys only work beach muscles? Is that what's going on here? Right? I only work what I can see in the mirror. That's it. Right, what else? How about a reverse fly? Nobody works their posterior delt? Nobody? You guys are all just kind of front heavy, huh? You know, eventually you're going to have to leave the room and people are going to be staring at your back. Just for those of you guys who don't work your back. Anything else?
What about like barbell rows?
Barbell rows. How many of you guys have done like a barbell row, wide grip? It's transverse plane, right? Your arms are moving parallel to that table. All right, lower. What can I do for my lower body? Seated hip abduction and adduction. How many of you guys have seen these machines? Yeah. Again, not some of my favorite equipment. There's an anatomical reason for that, which we'll get to later. When I was training trainers for Equinox, I used to have a competition for those machines. Whoever could carry the machine home could keep it. I thought that was a good way to get rid of it. Never happened. Those things are heavy. Anybody got any other exercises? All right, the lower body for transverse plane, I admit, it's kind of tough. We'll get to it in a second, though. I think I can help you guys out. What about trunk? What can you do for trunk? Rotation. Like, what is that going to look like? What do you mean, how, as an exercise? Like a Russian twist? Cool. Whoops. Plank. Ooh, that's an interesting one. So let's go back a couple. We've mentioned a couple exercises that I definitely want to come back to, including your shrug, right? Let's not forget about the shrug. So, plank. Is there motion in a plank? So that makes it a little tougher to figure out. But now we have to think about which way is gravity pushing on our frame. All right, so what direction... All right, let me ask it this way. Gravity is parallel to which plane in a plank? Which direction are you guys in a plank? You're like this, right? On the floor. And gravity is pressing through me how? This way, right? So which plane is this? Sagittal. So we could write a plank here. Unless I do a plank on my side, then what happens? Right? If I'm this way, now which way is gravity pushing? It's this way, right? Right? Which is side to side, which is going to be which plane? Frontal. So I could put side planks over here. Let's go back to shrugs. Now, shrugs are difficult because what you're seeing, what we actually look at when we do shrugs is usually the front of us. You guys know what I'm talking about? I don't usually do shrugs, but if I was doing shrugs, I'd be looking at the mirror that way, right? But what bone is moving? My scapula, which is on my back. And how are my scapula moving? Up and down, right? Superior to inferior, right? Or inferior to superior, I guess. Like this. Which plane is this actually parallel to? Frontal. I know, like, from my example of the narrow sagittal plane hallway, it looks like you're doing this with your shoulders, but in actuality, it's your scapula moving parallel to that frontal plane. Does that make sense? So for upper and frontal, we could put shrugs. Anybody have any other exercise they want me to address? They didn't know where to put it, so they didn't say anything. Huh? Shoulder press. All right, hold that, because we're actually going to get into that in a little bit more detail in a second. I got a few ways to look at a shoulder press. So, some things for you guys to think about as we're about to go into the muscular anatomy section. I think you guys started to notice something here. We notice we have a lot of exercises for what muscle group? Well, upper body, yes, but chest fly, bench press, wide grip push-up, what muscle is that supposed to be working? Pecs mostly, right? And the pecs have a fiber direction in which direction? It's this way, right? It's horizontal. So they have a transverse fiber arrangement. Wouldn't it kind of make sense that muscles with a transverse fiber arrangement help move us in the transverse plane? How do you think muscles will be situated to move us in the sagittal plane? Up and down. Where would they be located? It's going to be up and down. Where would they be located? Yeah, so they're situated, usually muscles that move us in the sagittal plane are running up and down on either the front or the back of our bodies. Doesn't that make sense? Because we said forward and back, up and down. What about frontal plane muscles? Where do you think they're going to be situated? They're going to be situated on the sides running up and down. Does that kind of make sense? As we start looking at your muscular anatomy, the goal will be for you guys to be able to visualize how these muscles are going to move you, not just memorize a bunch of joint actions, because we all know how tedious that can be. Fair enough? Now, does life happen in one plane? No, but you guys noticed that you had a really easy time coming up with exercises in which plane? Sagittal was easy, and then we got over there, and it was like, oh. When we get into a gym, how do most people train? Which plane? Sagittal. You think that's beneficial for health and performance? For rehab? No, right? Occasionally we have to move in other planes. Imagine if you only had the sagittal plane to move in, and you tried to walk here. Right? You'd be like, okay, for a while. Sagittal, 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 and then you'd get to the door. Now what? Can I stay in the sagittal plane? What are you going to do if you can only move in the sagittal plane because that's all you've trained in? Like, you're going to walk to the door and be like, all right, dude, somebody turn me. Somebody turn me. I need to get out of the sagittal plane. Right? You can't do that. You have to start training outside of this sagittal, 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 sagittal thing. So let me give you guys a little bit of help. We're going to do a little activity to try to look at a couple exercises and see how we might be able to change them to work them in different planes, get a little bit more creative with our exercise selection. So, push-ups. We've already done a couple of these already. What did you say? You can do push-ups in which planes? We said transverse for sure, right? So everybody do a transverse plane push-up for me. Just go through the motions. Good. Your elbows would be high here, right? Let's do a sagittal plane. Now your elbows would run right next to your body. What about a frontal plane? Be creative. This would actually still be transverse, right? This would still be parallel to your desk. Definitely a creative way to do a push-up. Oh, yeah, who said that? Yeah, I was like, yeah, you can't do push-ups. This is true. It's a true story. You can't do push-ups in the frontal plane. This dude was like, yes, you can. And I was like, show me. And sure enough, he just walked over to the wall and went, thunk, got into a handstand. Now, that's not for pecs anymore, right? That's for what muscles? What muscles are we working? It's more like shoulders at that point, but sure enough, he just popped out 5. Show off. And sure enough, he created a frontal plane push-up. I like it, though, because at least it was creative, right? He's getting out of the box. So pull-ups. How can we do pull-ups in multiple planes? How do you guys usually do pull-ups? This way, right? So everybody does pull-ups in what plane? Frontal plane pull-ups. All right, so we got frontal plane pull-ups. How could I get out of the frontal plane? Yeah, how many of you guys do chin-ups? Right? Or maybe you guys have those fancy handles. You guys know the fancy handles on some of them where they like have 2 or 3 different hand grips, and you can kind of grab this way and do like a neutral grip pull-up. So that's a sagittal plane pull-up. It's good. So now we got sagittal, frontal. How could I do a transverse plane pull-up? Huh? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many of you guys have ever used a Smith machine to do what's basically the opposite of a push-up? You guys know what I'm talking about? So you hang back from the Smith machine, body straight, your heels are down on the floor, and you just pull up this way. So tough. So tough. One of my favorite exercises. I actually have a challenge on my YouTube channel where I have the model that's with me doing a horizontal pull-up, right, is what I call that, hanging pull-up, with his feet on a stability ball, and I make him do 20. That's the challenge. Anybody up for that challenge? All right, a few of you guys are up for the challenge. Send me the video. Put it on your phone. Send me the video. All right, so we got pull-ups in 3 different planes. You want to do shoulder press? Should we do some shoulder press? So let's do shoulder press through 3 different planes. What's this? So this would be frontal plane. Can I do sagittal plane? Yeah, I like sagittal plane press. A lot of people don't do it. How many of you guys have done like a front squat to press? Right, like done one of these things? I like teaching that as a sagittal plane thing. Because if we're playing sport, we don't always try to press up this way. Right? If I'm coming down the lane, the only sport I know, guys, is basketball. I'm sorry if you guys play any other sport. I wasn't that athletic. Remember, I was a jazz musician. But if I come up through the lane, right, boom, am I going to pull up and try to get to the rim going this way? No, I'm going to come this way, right? So there's no problem training through the sagittal plane. How could I get a little transverse plane component to my overhead press? Yeah, like the old Arnold presses, right? Have a little shoulder rotation. Yeah, you could do stuff like that. There's no problem. As long as there's no pain. You've progressed somebody well. So we could add a little rotation to that. What about step-ups? What plane are step-ups in? Sagittal. Right? So we got sagittal, front and back. How would I make them frontal? So yeah, if I do a step-up, if I put a step here, and instead of doing this, I do this, that becomes a frontal plane step-up, right? Now I'm starting to train people to move side to side a little bit better. How would I make that transverse? Rotate how? Yes, you rotate in the transverse plane.
Explain it. You face one direction, then you go to step up, you turn.
Right. So if I started facing this way, put the step here. Everybody's with me? And I went, boom. Would that be a transverse plane step up? Good thing to practice? Do you have to move in the transverse plane? As we saw from my example, every time you want to make a left or right turn, you have to at least move in the transverse plane for a second. So these are all ways for you guys to progress your exercise. That's a good little activity for you guys to do. If you get stuck, you don't know how to get new exercises into your program, it might be worth just going, okay, well, how could I take this into different planes? You'd be surprised what you can come up with. All right. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll get into joint actions. Sound good? Don't get so excited.